So it's early January 2016, and I thought I'd do a piece on something that often is in people's interest, which is buying second-hand cars, buying used motor vehicles, be it a motorcycle or a used car. I thought I'd do a little bit of an analysis on what it is that you're doing when you buy one of these. And if I just compare things to how they used to be, that would probably be helpful. So what's the improvement, so-called? The improvement since we started on new media. And you can now have a great search for cars. That's one of the things you can do. So instead of, you got the magazine before, the autotrader, newspaper even, but it was manual. You'd literally open a piece of paper and you would go through it and you'd select the ones that were in your category, which, pardon me, meant basically you'd go for stuff that was in a certain price bracket. Now what you couldn't do, it seemed, was any more significant analysis than that. So you couldn't say I want all the red cars, which is why obviously they show this in the advertisement. They show a woman reclining, relaxed, tapping away on a tablet and looking for all the red cars in a certain price bracket, presumably. Which is the big change. But there are things it does to you and to your way of thinking that change your whole position when you come to buy a car. I'm just going to point these things out. I'll point out the main differences and then I'll point out the things that happen that they do to you when they're trying to sell you a car. That they can do online that they couldn't do before. So first of all, you used to get a tiny little picture. It was a postage stamp sized picture. And you would look at that and try and scrutinise it. I wouldn't be the first person who back in the old days got a magnifying glass out and tried to see if that wing was really dented or that wheel was chipped, all that stuff. And that doesn't happen so much now because usually you get some kind of picture that you can zoom in on or expand on your tablet or whatever. They give you basically a collection of pictures now that are quite a decent size plus the text. So the first thing I would say is immediately I say, well, that's a lot better in that regard compared to the old way because you had a tiny little picture and probably a few words. Now you've got a lot more pictures and I would probably say, if anything, there may be less words, which isn't necessarily a good thing. The main difference though is that, but when it comes to what they put in those pictures, they are now able to put across a much bigger lie in the pictures. So I'll give you one example of what I mean. Being a family man, I classically have to go and look at things like estate cars, what they call wagons, or whatever you want to call them in the States. Cars with extended rear ends that can supposedly have a bigger luggage capacity. It doesn't always work that way, but certainly if you want odd shaped things to go in your car, it can work. So I'll be looking at these cars. Now a traditional thing that happens to these cars is the rear suspension over time gets saggy. Now I only buy cars that have significant mileage on. Basically that's just how I buy cars. So I'm looking for a car that's got a reasonable quality and has an engine that will last and stuff like that. But the suspension's another aspect to look at when you buy the kind of car I'm buying. But it applies to a lot of other cars as well. You will find that if there's any issue with the suspension on the car, when you take the photographs, they will try and mask this or hide it by parking the car on effectively an uneven part of the ground that they've got. Now, it may be tarmacked, but it could still well be uneven. So they'll park the vehicle in such a way that you won't notice that the rear suspension is sagged. Now you wonder, well, how can they do that? The immediate thing that comes to mind is that they jack up the rear end. Now don't laugh, because I am absolutely certain that in this world, if it can be done, when it comes to money, among other things, when it can be done, it will be done. So I'm certain the back ends of cars have been discreetly jacked up. But you don't need to go that far. You can just find a piece of ground such that the weight is more taken by the other side to which is being photographed. And then this leads to a thing that you often see in photographs of used cars for sale. There's only one side of the car mostly visible in the photos. And that's because they'd set it up just right so that there was the lie told, which is that the vehicle was apparently looking nice and level, or whatever it is that was most desirable for that vehicle. And then you go and drive it or go and sit in it, and unless you can look to see it from afar, and you may not, you may go to the vehicle when you go to look at it physically, and it's squashed in between a couple of other vehicles, then you can't see it from a distance. And the whole sales process could go on without you ever seeing it from a distance. So bear in mind that that's one thing. So the back could be sagging like mad, and you never notice it, or because you never get a look at it before you actually come to the point and decide to buy it or not. One thing that is not conveyed in all these pictures is that there's the thing you can't get, which is smell-o-vision. A lot of these vehicles stink. If you're going for an old second-hand car, a lot of them stink. So literally all you need to do is to go to sit in that car physically. This is all the time you need to spend. Go to sit in it. If you feel icky and like you don't want to put your hands on the steering wheel, and there is a bit of a smell and you find yourself not breathing in properly, you can walk away right then. There's another thing that all these photographs lead them to do. With so much of it being based on photographs, they can get away with very little words because there are so many photographs. So you go on autotrader online or eBay online, very similar experience. The photographs can say it all and say nothing. So there's the smell-o-vision thing. There's the fact they can stand it and pose it for photographs. They can carefully mask problems there are with it. What else is it? Paperwork. Full service history, FSH. Be very wary of this. I went for a vehicle and it had a full service history. I know this because I didn't even look at any vehicle that didn't have one. That was one of the things I put in the tick box. Show me only the vehicles with full service history. So I went there and saw the guy, and there were various things to talk about, and they like to keep you talking about other stuff usually. So don't be too friendly with them. And then it came to the thing about the service history. Now, just as a matter of course, he showed me the booklet and I sort of looked through it. It was missing something that was really important, which was the cam belt being changed. So just as a matter of interest and a matter of course, when I came away from the place, I had the reg number, and I I called the dealer that supposedly did the service history, did the service stamps. He happened to be in Sheffield. And the dealer looked up their system and said, no, we didn't do that. But the dealer admitted that some of their stamps had gone missing. So it absolutely, not only could it be portrayed as full service history by the guy who's trying to sell me it, but in addition to that, he could also moderately claim, I don't accept this by the way, but in his view I could see how he would think he would get away with it, because he wouldn't look very hard. I mean, my point to him was, if me as a punter, I know to ring up the Volvo garage and check that this is genuine, and they do it for free, because of course it's in their interest to point out that fake full service histories are around the place. If I can do that, then him as a second-hand car dealer, I damn sure expect him to do it. I expect him to make that phone call. Okay, so full service history. I'm going to say this, at least half the time they're not actually full service histories. It's what the dealer guy, the reseller, the guy trying to punt you it, it's what he thinks, and it usually is a he, it's what he thinks he can get away with, portraying to you as the potential buyer. Another thing that pictures do to you, they tend to bias you towards how the car looks. You become a lot less interested in the words, because pictures grab your attention. Now, used car dealers know this. So they'll deliberately buy cars at auction that look good more than they go well. It becomes more important to them than ever how the car looks, because they know that's the basis on which you'll be buying it. Pretty pictures. And how it runs and stuff, you only get 30 minutes to look at that, but you probably spend 4 times that time poring over the photographs of a vehicle that you're really interested in and that you want to go and see. And remember, those photographs have been posed. Okay, so you've got to really be careful about that. Now, I mentioned the smell earlier of vehicles. We were trying to sell a vehicle recently. It's 15 years old, but we've had it almost since brand new. It's not important. except in this regard. It means I know the inside track in this vehicle. I know it's been well maintained. It's had the cam belt done twice or 3 times in its life. Anyway, once was very recently. All that stuff, all the important stuff. So the interesting thing is, why will no one buy it? Well, this is where the general world, we happen to be in the UK, but I'm sure it applies in other countries as well. The general world tendency towards snobbery in the first world goes against you, because somebody recently we know bought a car based on, she said she wanted a newer plate so she wouldn't buy this car that we had. Of course the car's 15 years old, year 2000 reg. So she bought a car instead that was a 2009 plate. It's not that well known or well regarded a make, but it was a 2009 plate. Service history, I'm damn sure she doesn't know anything about that. I don't think she knows that much about cars from what I've seen, so she wouldn't particularly know how well it ran. She thinks she got a good deal on it. That's all okay, right? But that vehicle, this brings out one of the other big points. The 2 main things people might look for in vehicles are the mileage and the service history. Now, the thing I've pointed out really is that this particular person was drawn by the recent nature of the car. It seemed to be 2009, which in her mind is a lot better. Now, I would say that if you're going to be a car snob, you want to be buying a much more expensive car, and it's got to be a hell of a lot more recent reg than 2009 before it matters to anybody else. However, that's the car she bought. Now, it's got something like 60,000 miles on it, or 55,000 or something. That's another big issue. I used to think that if a car had high mileage, it meant it hadn't been clocked. But of course, the figures are that most cars have been clocked. I hope you realise that before you even get to the point of seeing my video. Most cars have been clocked. So in other words, when you go to look at a car, you should not be thinking, oh, I hope it hasn't been clocked. You should be thinking, this has probably been clocked. What checks am I going to make on that? So when a car that's 6 years old is 55,000 miles, and it's a small car, that could be right. Except have a look around when you get a pizza delivered. What kind of cars do they come in? Well, the answer is they come in exactly that kind of car. It's a little commuter type car. So it's just as likely to be clocked now. Pardon me, because those cars do many more miles than they perhaps used to. If it was owned by a little old lady who lived out, out the back of beyond and near a little, had a little cottage and stuff, then okay, she might only do 10,000 miles a year. A lot of people do less. They do about 7,000 or 8,000 miles a year in a little car like that. But if you're going to buy that based on the mileage, you need to then look at the full service history, which I've already pointed out could be horrendously bogus unless you actually make some checks yourself. Now, most people, I'm going to take a punt on this, when they see full service history, most people don't actually go to the extent of making a check themselves. They look at the stamps and that's it. That isn't you checking a full service history. You have to ring up the garage whose stamp it is, Volkswagen Sheffield or Volvo, North London or whatever it is. You've got to look it up and ring them up. And then you'll get the truth because they look up the database. It doesn't cost you a penny. So you should do it. As for that particular dealer that was trying to sell me that vehicle, unabashed, their main reaction was to make sure they took the photographs down straight away. Now, I'd already snapshotted all the pictures and text and everything on my tablet, so he couldn't escape the fact I got a full record of him saying it in full service history. But he was unabashed, and basically he made a show of calling somebody supposedly and asking some questions and all sorts of stuff. But the guy basically said it didn't make any difference to the value of the car. Now you immediately question that. It doesn't make any difference to the value of the car. Remember, it's what you can get away with. What he reckons is that by the time I'm that deeply hooked into it, I probably won't walk away. And indeed I didn't walk away. Because I'm going to already be so interested that is going to be less of a point in my head. If I was genuinely not interested after I found out it had a false full service history, I would simply have never come back. The reason I came back is because I know that most full service histories are lies and most mileages are lies. So I already know it's a lie before I even go there. Now, a lot of people watching this won't know that. They will think, well, it might be a lie. there might be a mileage that's been clocked, there might be this, might be that. It usually has been. And if you think the electronic readout means it's harder to clock back, the same device that all these guys use to find out what faults are in the vehicle, they use to clock it. So in other words, any garage worth its salt, any dealer worth its salt already has at least one of these devices, probably two at his disposal, that do exactly this task. You can do it from a tablet. You can get software for a tablet that means you can adjust the mileage. There are some legitimate reasons you might do this, but like if you change the speedometer or something. But really, there's no way to stop it. I would say it's more likely now that the vehicle will be clocked than before. So the full service history would counteract that, because you'd have all the little tickets, MOT tickets. But if you don't have that, of course, if there's bits missing, you want to be careful about that. One last point, I'm getting on a bit, this is 16 minutes. One last point I want to mention is this, and it's quite important. We live in a world of mass production. One Ford Focus, not a car I have, but one Ford Focus looks very much like another. When you see pictures of a car like that, you have to be very careful if they've got 3 or 4 or 5 in the lot that you can see, and maybe 3 or 4 you can't see around the back. Because they will take a picture of the best one. They might even, and I bet this has been done too, take a picture of a vehicle that isn't theirs, but is in better condition, and they'll put that on the pictures on the autotrader to sell you. If it can be done, it gets done. Any bullshit you can imagine actually does happen. So they will take pictures of a car that isn't even theirs, as long as it's the same model and in decent shape, and they will portray to you that that is that car. Remember, mass production, they all pretty much look the same. So when you see it, just understand you've probably just seen a representation of that car. Are those the pictures of the actual car? You could ask the question. I don't know if it's worth asking, but you could ask the question. You certainly have in mind when you go there that the car that you saw pictures of may not be the car that you actually are put in front of. Okay? I'll do more on this, but it's a never-ending scam selling second-hand vehicles. Alright, thanks for watching and listening.